awesome to be here. And I hope you know why it's better in the Bahamas now. So I'm Rhonda, and I will introduce my fellow Bahamians. And yes, I am a Bahamian. So it's wonderful to be here to share with you this wonderful industry that is growing in our country. So I will do a quick introduction of everyone. And I will ask them to give me a word or a phrase that embodies what is happening right now in our nation. So first we have the Honorable Chester Cooper, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Tourism, Investments, and Aviation for the Bahamas.
It's transformative.
Awesome. Next we have the Honorable Ryan Pinder, QC, Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. One word or phrase.
Progressive innovation.
Awesome. Then we have Tanya. Tanya I've known for many years, and she's the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of the Bahamas Financial Services Board.
I'd say collaborative.
Awesome. And then finally, we have Aliya, who is a partner at Graham Thompson Attorneys.
Oh, only one word?
You could use a phrase.
Pragmatic and deliberate.
Awesome. So we're going to take you on a journey of why it's better business in the Bahamas. And we would ask we don't get through everything, feel free to reach out to anyone or reach out to the office of the various ministers to ask questions. So we'll start with you, Minister Cooper. We're going to talk a little bit about the investment environment, the policy, and the climate. So give us an overview, just a general overview of the investment policy for digital assets and the tech business and some of the incentives.
Well, let me firstly say that when we came to office, the Prime Minister sent a signal to the world that we are open for business. Yep. Since then, we have been charting a course to make it easier to do business in the Bahamas. And we've been very deliberate, we've been very focused, building on the framework we have in terms of regulations, in terms of our legislative environment, our strong infrastructure that's already in place. And of course, we have a strong tourist industry,
right,
which should not be underestimated things to do. An environment that's absolutely pristine. When you bring it all together,
most
it
definitely.
works in
And I
harmony.
would think we would want to be known more than for the beauty of our nation, but the talent and passion of our people as well in terms of what we do.
Absolutely.
So give us a little insight on the framework for investments in the Bahamas.
Well, one of the things we try to do in Invest Bahamas, now the Bahamas Investment Authority, is to be very transparent and to be very quick, to be innovative, and be very responsive to the needs of the investment community.
Right.
When we do this, it creates energy, and this is an exciting time in the
Indeed.
Bahamas right now. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to be involved with this process, to oversee the investment growth. We're seeing significant investment growth at the moment. The crypto business and digital asset industry generally has brought new energy. We've been able to pivot our already established financial services industry into doing this business, and this is working very well for us. The economic impact is significant, and we see great opportunities for our people as well as our country as a whole.
Awesome. And I guess, being the Minister of Tourism as well, what do you see as the synergies between fintech and tourism and how those things can really bring great value to all stakeholders in the community?
Well, when we talk about being transformative, we don't just look at this as an opportunity to build an industry that caters to the outside world, but we want to build an industry as well that Bahamians would benefit and participate in. Tourism is bringing 65% of our gross domestic product at the moment. We want to diversify. We promised in our blueprint for change that we're going to bring new industries, and we're well on the way to doing so. The infrastructure that exists for tourism, whether it's a lovely hotel like this, would also be suitable for business travel. In terms of the digital wallets and digital payments, this is also suitable. We want this to be an industry that benefits Bahamians as well. jobs and opportunities and linkages. And I think we're seeing this happen in a very harmonious way.
I think the one question that would sort of bring up then is how do you see access and opportunities for investments in the country if you're looking at something holistically for everyone? You talked about diversification. Can you expand a little bit on that, please?
We want the Bahamian people to create wealth and participate in the industry as investors, not just as employees, not just as providing linkage business, but also we want to build capacity, and building capacity in terms of providing services, but also creating wealth and participating as investors in this business.
Awesome. Thank you. We're going to now move more into the legal and policy framework, and we're going to ask Minister Pinder to expand on these areas for us. What are the objectives of the digital assets policy? Can you just give us an overview of what we have there?
So for those who wouldn't know in the audience, last week the government of the Bahamas publicized a policy white paper on digital assets to set the framework of how the country looks at its approach in this sector and in this industry. As many would know, the Bahamas have been trailblazers in the digital asset industry for a number of years now. We issued the first central bank backed digital currency in the sand dollar. We were progressive and innovative, using the terms that I used before, in developing a regulatory framework in the digital asset and the Regulated Exchange Act, which created the licensing and regulation for the sector, which was novel at the time. This was end of 2020, and it was novel that we would come and put that framework together. But I think as a country, we were very well placed, and we had learned from our history, as the Deputy Prime Minister said, in financial services, in which we knew the benefit of having to be nimble and having to be reactive to a changing marketplace. But secondly, we understood that the integrity that comes with having a regulated framework was actually a very attractive thing for a fast-growing industry, and especially for those participants in the industry that were the good players that a country like the Bahamas are looking for to be here and to be part of what we are in the country. And I think that was very innovative, and it certainly was very progressive by the regulator, the Securities Commission of the Bahamas, in order to be able to advance that framework and give the comfort to the international environment of where we were and where we were heading. And the policy white paper is just in addition to that.
Right.
And it spelled out some clear frameworks of where we're looking to go. Certainly, as the Deputy Prime Minister said, we're an investment-friendly and a business-friendly jurisdiction. But I think the international community, it's important for them to know that we do have an overarching policy to attract business in this space. One of the things going back many of years that the Bahamas, and I'm sure Tanya will speak about this, that has been to our benefit is that we have been able to be nimble, and we have been able to be reactive, and we have been able to be innovative, but we've also been able to do it in a way that protects the jurisdictional risk that may exist when you go into new areas, and new areas that are new in regulation, but also new areas that some may deem to be higher risk than others.
Right. So when you think about those things, I mean, one of the things I would say that catapulted us into international recognition or notice was the DARE Act. Can you give us some insights on that act and how those things, why, I have had so many questions, and I remember when Tanya and Aliya did the presentation, I think Christina as well, I went online and I was just shocked at the number of people who were literally just focused on that. So give us a little bit on the DARE Act.
So on the DARE Act, what we were looking to do is to put an envelope, a regulatory envelope around, at the time, all participants within the digital asset business. So certainly we had a licensing regime for service providers, whether that be an exchange or whether that be another type of service provider, such as a digital wallet provider. And we wanted to have a licensing regime for those types of businesses doing business in the Bahamas. But secondly, we wanted to also have a framework for for coin and token offerings. We would, at the time, that was a rather hot commodity. We would see a lot of different tokens and different coins being offered as a public offering in the marketplace effectively. And what we wanted to do is also capture that framework within the legislation so we could properly have a regulated offering of tokens and coins, which I think was rather novel at the time, for sure. And so when you have large players and good players in the industry looking to do business internationally, and especially with respect to banking and other financial services, the regulation to hold yourself out and say, I'm regulated in the Bahamas, which is an IOSCO A jurisdiction from a securities point of view, it gives you a lot of credibility. And it gives you credibility in the marketplace. And I think internationally we're regarded as certainly best practices when it comes to securities regulation.
And then how do you see us differentiating ourselves from other jurisdictions that have similar types of regulation or legislation?
Well, I mean, I don't know what other jurisdictions have similar type of regulations. I think we're actually probably ahead of the pack in that. In fact, just a month or so ago, you saw the United States and President Biden issue an executive order effectively to try to put in policies of what we have done as a country over the last 3 years. So I do think we are a trailblazer, and we're actually ahead of the international developments in this. And we look to be able to amend and to shift the legislation and the regulatory regime as the industry shifts. And that is one of the key features that would differentiate a country like the Bahamas from other countries who are trying or have put in legislation. One, we're experienced in shifting and reacting to international environments with respect to our legislation and our product offerings. We've done that for many generations now. But secondly, being a small country, a nimble country, having a progressive government, and certainly a visionary prime minister, we have the ability to put legislation together quickly, put it together based upon consultation and industry best practices, but put it together reacting to where the industry is actually going.
Right.
And I think that is a fundamental difference between the Bahamas as a country where to base your business, because you have the attention and the swift response from a regulatory and a legislative environment to react to the changes that we're seeing. We anticipate in the coming months to have some amendments to the DARE Act that we will put and table and pass through Parliament that will react to some of the new developments that we're seeing in NFTs and DeFi and other key changes that are at the forefront of the digital asset industry.
Right. And so, of course, when we talk about, and I would think this particular segment of the conference, we're looking at more institutional players. And institutional players are always saying, we would love to embrace the new industry, but of course, they're saying we are regulated. And we need to make sure we stay within a framework where the regulations are following the investments that we're making. So on that point, what type of regulatory reporting and crypto reporting do you see, or what do you expect to see in the industry?
Well, that's a very good question. We are monitoring certainly international best practices on a daily basis. Those here in the industry would know that different institutions that impose regulatory frameworks on you, such as the FATF and OECD and EU, and these other multinational institutions, try to create rules that others are supposed to follow. Now, it's fundamental that the Bahamas, as a good regulatory environment and a country that is progressive and inviting business, also remains itself compliant with international best practices. And those international best practices seem to be changing by the day. But we're reacting to that. In fact, those who have had the opportunity to read the government's white paper, and I encourage everybody to go ahead and take a look at it. It's at the Office of the Prime Minister's website. You would note that we have definitive provisions and goals and policy statements with respect to keeping compliant with international best practices. But not only that, we've created in that policy framework a digital advisory committee, which is made up of industry experts and industry participants from within the Bahamas, and it's a committee that I, as Attorney General, chair, but it's made up of private sector persons, and I'm pleased to announce yourself and Aliya are on that committee. And I think it's very important to say that because that committee is tasked with monitoring the international environment, monitoring what the obligations of the country are going to be, and providing a policy and advisory recommendation to the Digital Policy Committee, which is actually a committee of the highest elements. It consists of the Prime Minister, the Governor of the Central Bank, the Executive Director of the Securities Commission, the Financial Secretary, and myself as Chairman of the Advisory Committee, to implement swiftly and attentively these developments that we're seeing around the world that are developing, whether it be through the OECD, FATF, or other international best practices that may come. So the Bahamas is committed to, one, having nimble regulation, but having regulation that's respected, and then remaining as a jurisdiction in good stead with the international environment.
Thank you so much. It was just really very informative. So we're going to shift a little bit to Tanya now. We're going to talk about the digital assets, business, and financial services innovation. And so maybe tell us a little bit about how we got here, Tanya. I mean, not physically here, but how did we as a country get to where we are today?
Thank you for the opportunity to share a bit about our journey. When you asked me to describe the environment, the word I used was collaborative. And I would say to you that what differentiates the Bahamas, I believe, from other jurisdictions is this shared commitment by policymakers, the regulators, and the business environment to create an enabling environment where business can thrive and grow. And it is from that space that we saw the digital assets business evolve and become what it is today. I recall back in 2017 where I had some members of BFSB come to me and say, you know, there are some opportunities in the financial services space for us to focus on fintech, look at digital payments, there are entrepreneurial opportunities, smart contracts, and they listed all of these opportunities and said, we need a regulatory framework. Well, actually, they said to me, we need a regulatory sandbox. Well, you know, we then reached out, as is a normal course here, because we have access to our regulators, and I see Christina right in the front, our executive director from the Securities Commission, and we began the dialogue around how we might create a framework to regulate fintech, but to really seize the opportunities that existed in the space. And we didn't agree necessarily on how that would play out, and you would note that unlike some other countries, we didn't take the sandbox approach, which some of us felt was the approach that ought to have been taken, and we decided that we wanted certainty. And there is this dialogue, there is accessibility to regulators and policymakers that I believe creates a business environment where people, especially in this fast-paced, evolving area of digital assets business, will find very attractive here in the Bahamas. And so collaboration, and we actually consulted with all of the relevant regulators, not only the Securities Commission, but the central bank. We met with policymakers, and the regulator took a very deliberate and measured approach. And sometimes those of us in business can be a little bullish. But there is this healthy balance, and the general view was, we don't necessarily want to be the first out of the gate, but when we do this, we want to do it right. And we engaged experts, we talked to industry, and I think it is that healthy dialogue and that accessibility that really makes the Bahamas attractive. There's real collaboration.
And I can say I've seen that over the last few days and over the last few years of just being in this space and getting a feel for what's on the ground. And Aliya and I speak almost weekly about what's going on. And there is collaboration because you have to have one voice. So when we talk about that one voice, how important has the public-private sector partnership been in the development of the digital assets business? I know you have the innovators and the bold thinkers coming forward, but tell us a little bit about that experience.
I think it has been critical. So what BFSB, the Bahamas Financial Services Board, for those of you who do not know, it really embodies public-private sector partnership. Our primary mandate is to create a greater awareness in the international community about what the Bahamas offers by way of financial services. But we also serve as an advocate for industry. And so, to the extent that our mandate is something that the government and industry invests in, I want you to know that public-private sector partnership really underpins everything that we do in the financial services industry. And we see that playing out not only as the legislation evolves, we're being engaged as the amendments are being put forward, new rules are being put forward, and industry is engaged in that, but also in the promotion of the jurisdiction as a digital assets hub. We were recently in New York. We'll be in London next month. Not only the business, but policymakers come along with us to outline the framework and for us to say why this is an enabling environment.
Right, and I happened to be in New York. I came to the event in New York, and the title was the 360, and it was great to see other areas like insurance part of that discussion. So where do you see crypto, the crypto business, falling in terms of the value proposition the Bahamas presents to the world?
The AG touched on this. He spoke about our history of being an innovative jurisdiction. I believe what we're seeing in the digital assets or the crypto space really builds on or further extends the Bahamas' capacity to be and what we have shown ourselves to be as an innovative jurisdiction. The Bahamas was the first common law jurisdiction to introduce a civil law foundation. The Bahamas has innovated in the investment fund space, the Icon Fund, the Smart Fund. And so this really is a continuation of the innovation, which serves as a key plank of our value proposition as an international financial center.
And of course, you know, I've got lots of questions for the BSFB because I think it's important for us to get to the market what we do, not just in terms of promoting it, but marketing it in the right way with the right words and a narrative. So tell me a little bit about, you know, in terms of what you do with BSFB, what are the engagements that you see with the international service providers and the advisors, and what feedback do you get from the DARE Act? Because, you know, we can present something to the world, but of course, when you go out there, people have thoughts on maybe some things that don't really work, or you can tweak it, or you need to revisit that. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you know, the Bahamas, because we are one of the few jurisdictions in the world that has actually defined the regulatory framework, I think that places us in an advantageous position. So what I hear from service providers as we engage with them internationally is that the certainty that this jurisdiction provides is something that's attractive. After New York, I can tell you there was tremendous interest into what the application process is. There were questions as to why did FTX choose the Bahamas? And we were able to outline the value proposition, and critical to that, like I said, is the certainty that the regulatory framework provides.
And I would tell you, when the news broke of FTX, I was getting calls, and I was, you know, I would call Aliya, and I said, okay, I'm going to give you some names, and, you know, I phoned a few other lawyers, because there was great, I don't know if you want to call it celebration, but after what we had gone through as a country, this was something that, it was just one of those things that it was time for us to really rise, and this was something that was wonderful. And I said that to FTX today. So how would you describe, you know, you talked a little bit about the international environment, the business environment, but we come back to home. How is this impacting the business environment here?
Well, I would say, you know, we have a very mature financial services industry. We've been in this space for a very long time. We are pioneers in the region. I like to say we're probably the premier jurisdiction this side of the world. And I think it's forcing the traditional banks, perhaps, to look at business models and to see how they can embrace what the digital asset space offers. And so I think we are seeing some business models change. I see opportunities. we identified entrepreneurship. So there's a tremendous interest among Bahamians as to how do they fit into this space and how they can access this space as well.
Yeah, and that's I think very important because I would think that when you think about inclusion and access, and particularly financial literacy, it should be for everyone. And we should not just be the tourist part. We need to be that business part as well. So in terms of everything that's been discussed, many of you may be asking, well, how does it all happen? What do we expect if we come to the Bahamas? What's the process, right? It's great to have this theoretical view of what's going on, but what will I be experiencing? And so, we discussed over the last week how we are going to really present this to the world. And Aliya and I are now going to move towards discussing high level the digital asset system. And for those who are wondering, what should I expect? We hope we can get those answers to you. So how do you, in terms of the digital assets business, fit into the ecosystem that exists in the Bahamas, given its historical and continuing significance as an international financial center?
Well, as all of the panelists here said, the Bahamas has been an IFC of significance for many years. That has been built on the back of an incredibly strong fiduciary toolkit. And it is that toolkit that is serving us extremely well, serving our clients extremely well in the digital asset space. So for instance, in the Bahamas, you have a very flexible corporate vehicle called the IBC. You have the private law foundation that Tanya mentioned. And we are seeing in our practice clients choosing to, for instance, incorporate a foundation with an underlying IBC to facilitate token issuances. We are seeing clients look at foundations and other fiduciary entities like the executive entity to facilitate DAOs. So there are a lot of interesting use cases for our toolkit. And one thing that you're able to do in the Bahamas that is unique is you're able to do absolutely everything here. There's no jurisdiction that I'm aware of where you can bank as a crypto business, where you can launch a crypto fund. For instance, we have a smart fund where you can incubate a crypto strategy either as an emerging manager or if you're an established manager and effectively want to create some sort of track record and a strategy that perhaps is new for you. This is the only jurisdiction where you can also, in the context of that, we have first-in-class trusts and trust legislation. We have an incredibly skilled trust administration workforce, and that expertise is really deep in the jurisdiction. So clients really get 360. They get the full picture in the Bahamas and we're able to service all of the clients' needs, including moving them to the Bahamas, getting them work permits, and I really do think that there's no other jurisdiction like it, and we're incredibly well positioned for the future.
Awesome. So can you walk us through the setting up of a business? What's the process? Okay, someone contacts you. Just give us maybe, because I know I'm looking at the time, give us maybe baby steps through the process.
This is very high level. I had the misfortune of going after two ministers. So very high level, we have we encourage, and indeed the commission encourages, a pre-application meeting. We would also suggest that if you're a significant business and want to sort of move operations here, that you meet with the Bahamas Financial Services Board and with the government. It is an open door policy, and they are always, you're able to get that kind of access, meet with them and understand the business and regulatory environment. You will also engage with service providers like lawyers. And although I like to think that we're the only sort of shop in town, we have an incredibly deep bench of talent in legal services in the Bahamas. So, so you have your choice of service providers. They will do their due diligence. They'll help you collate your application. That application includes due diligence on beneficial owners, the CEO, compliance officer is applicable. It includes information on internal policies, like cybersecurity policies, which are incredibly important. You know, it also, you also have to submit a full business plan with 3-year projections. So that's really just sort of high level. And of course, you have to have AML policies, which align with the Commission's rules, well, recently issued rules for consultation. Once those become final, digital asset businesses will have to comply with those as well.
Okay, we seem to have a bit of a cushion, so I'm going to, do you want to, oh, I'm sorry, were you finished?
So I'm not finished.
Oh, just watching the clock. Sorry.
So once you sort of get to the Commission, and I have to say, the reason I chose pragmatic is because we've been in this space since 2016, 2017. That coincided with the ICO craze. And at the time, we had a lot of clients persons coming to us, asking what the regulatory environment was like in the Bahamas. And the Bahamas is one of the only places that you can approach the Commission and get a letter of no, at that time, before DARE was even on the horizon, and get a letter of no objection in a relatively short time frame. And we were able to do that for a handful of clients, and certainly we didn't take on all inquiries. But for a handful of clients that were willing to interact with the regulator, that was certainly an option and provided that regulatory certainty. So the Commission will give you an approval in principle under DARE, and then you'll use that to approach the Bahamas Investment Authority, which is under the DPM's portfolio as Minister of Investments. And now you're able to get a letter of no objection in a streamlined fashion, and also to get your other ancillary approvals, and then including immigration approvals, and you're off to the races. Obviously that's highly truncated, given the time.
But I think we get a good feel for what is happening and what to expect. And so what are the key advantages of creating economic substance? Can you speak to that?
I can speak about what we see as the risks in not creating economic substance. So the Bahamas introduced legislation in 2018, which basically requires that certain activities that are carried out by corporate, by international business companies and companies at companies, that they demonstrate substantive business ties to the jurisdiction. What that means is that they have to show that they are incurring relevant expenditure, that they have people and premises in the jurisdiction that align with the economic activity that they say that they're doing from the jurisdiction. Otherwise, you create potentially unfunded tax liabilities, you have risk of audit, penalties and fines, whether it's in the Bahamas or in your home jurisdiction, that you're saying, well, we're tax resident in the Bahamas, but we have no substance. That only applies to relevant activities, and for the most part, most of crypto activity would sort of be out of scope, potentially, but you have things like headquartering, and so if you want to create a headquarters, that requires substance. You also have services business, you have intellectual property holding, so all of those sorts of things in commercialization of IP, all of those sorts of things you have to ask your legal advisor really to assess what your company is doing and how much economic substance you have to create. From a regulatory perspective, although the Commission does not have minimum physical presence rules, I think they're also approaching it pragmatically. They recognize that they will need to have regulatory oversight, and I don't want to step over on what Ms. Roll will address sort of on Friday, but but I think we're finding that the approach they're taking is an incredibly flexible one, although bearing in mind that regulators need oversight.
I agree.
So and we want to be a well-regulated jurisdiction.
Yeah, and what I'd like to sort of go full circle, not full circle, but we want to circle back to the minister. So we've heard all of this. Sounds awesome, right? What do you think we offer for investors?
Firstly, I would invite everyone to read the white paper and the policy. Secondly, I would invite you to consider that the government is committed to this industry, not just in word, but in action. We will establish a crypto desk at Bahamas Invest to help to facilitate new investors that come to our shores, and so that they can truly see the value proposition that we offer. The expertise are broad, as you can tell, on the panel today. We do have those professionals ready and willing to help to navigate the environment, and the government is firmly committed to the growing of the industry.
Awesome. So there you have it. I don't know if anyone has any last words that we wish to share. I think it was a great overview.
Well, I mean, I think it's important as we close to, and especially for those in the room where the Bahamas is relatively new for you. You're looking at different opportunities for your business and looking for jurisdictional options for your business. That you don't be hesitant in trying to explore and to see what the Bahamas has to offer. We are a jurisdiction that as has been said, have a lot of experience in welcoming businesses to do business within the Bahamas. And frankly, I don't think there's another country in the world that has the open dialogue and engagement with senior policymakers. And as we develop the regime on a continual basis, day in and day out, feedback from those in industry is important as we develop policy. Not saying we're going to take all your feedback, but feedback is absolutely important. And it's a good example is the white paper that we released. That white paper was circulated amongst industry participants and the regulators no fewer than 2 or 3 times for comment before it was issued. Now, we didn't take all the comments, but we took enough of the comments to have a well-rounded position. And I think that's an important leaping off point as we conclude today, that this is a country that is open to collaboration, open to input, open to advice, and open to framing the best system that we can to invite business to do business within our borders.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ministers Tanya and Aliya, and we hope we've answered all your questions. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.